And tonight, I got to be careful how I say it. I was going to say the most senior candidate, but that's in experience, not in age, or I'll get in trouble. So let's start with an introduction.
I'm Bill Buckley, and thanks for having me. Been a member of the Board of Selectmen for 4 terms, 12 years now, and I'm running 1 more term. And yeah, appreciate you having me here, and this is always a lot of fun when I meet with you.
I always start, as you know, with the same question I end with. Bill, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
That's a good question. I think, you know, I think over the course of my 12 years, I think I've demonstrated an independence, a willingness to get answers, a willingness to make hard decisions. There are a lot of things that have popped up through the course of my 12 years, through whether it be appointments, whether it be casino, one of the largest referendums or issues to face our town, where I've taken hard stands, willing to back those up with facts and data, willing to work collaboratively with town officials, FinCom as an example, where you sit. And no, I think it's been a good process. I think we're tough on ourselves, don't get me wrong. It's not always smooth, but it's about the results. To me, I'm all about results. And at the end of the day, it's similar to managing an organization. Sometimes you have to push that organization, and sometimes pushing that organization can be painful. Sometimes change is hard, and sometimes tackling new challenges can be hard. But I think, you know, when you push, you look for new ways to do things instead of saying, hey, this is the way we always did it. I think that's where the magic can happen. I think that's where special things happen. I think when you bring out the best of either, you know, the large groups of volunteers that we have working on FinCom and in other groups and committees, or in department head roles, or even, you know, any of the staff members.
Now, you talk about 12 years, but that's just the selectman piece.
Yes, yes, yes.
I was going to say, there's a couple more years before that.
Yeah, so I was on the, certainly I was on the school committee. I served on the school committee, but you know, I think that was good training ground. So you learn, you know, you learn contract negotiations. School committee is frankly responsible for the largest portion of the budget, over 67%. They have by far the largest number of employees. You know, I think we send out for full-time employees somewhere around 700 W-2s for full-time employees. There are a lot of seasonal and part-time employees, and the school committee and the school department is responsible for the vast majority.
There's like 400 some are all in the district somewhere.
But I think, you know, I think some of the work I'm most proud of in working with the schools is having worked long-range educational plans. Having worked on the councils. I've worked on the Brookside School Council, and I've worked at the high school school council. Learning the mechanics of that and helping people navigate through some of the challenges that exist with policy and budget is kind of more grassroots. When I chaired, or co-chaired, I should say, the long-range ed plan group, basically what the school committee came to us and said, hey, look, we've got a challenge with these buildings. We're not sure how many we want to maintain, what grade transitions we want to make. What we'd like you to do is work with a group of community members, staff members, FinCom members. They were represented. Most groups and committees were represented, including the superintendent of schools and staff members, where John Fernandez and I, we were both not in elective office at that time, pulled that together. And, you know, it came out to be the plan, a portion of that plan that you see today, where we idled Middle School East, not making it a one grade building for a lot of reasons of cost, and also for the issue associated with the impact that it has at 5th grade. One of the driving forces to that long-range ed plan was making sure 5th grade was put back into elementary. 5th grade in Stacy Middle School had all the transitions, much like a high school schedule. They also forfeited their recess and those things.
Bill, the thing I thought the most highly of is when I think of a 5th grader and a 7th grader, boy, that seems like a huge difference.
Yeah, and the idea, you know, from parents and the members on the committee, it was unanimous, by the way, the results. And that is we should build a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade for Woodland. And that was 15 years ago when we came out with that. just to give you an idea how long we've been planning, how long we've been working, how long we've been putting money away. So it didn't impact our operational budget, and we didn't need a Proposition 2.5 override.
Well, if you think about it, we're pushing the school committee now to say the last long-range ed plan that you all came up with gave us a roadmap for a decade and a half. So we could plan for it, we knew what was coming. And I want to know, when's the next one? Because there's a school coming. You know, we're going to have to do something with the high school someday.
Yeah, I think it'll need some modifications, upgrades, and whatnot. But back to the point about the middle school east piece of it, on the middle school east, the driving force was, let's let our children be children longer. Let's let them be in elementary school like you would expect fifth graders to be. Let's let them have recess. Let's let them, you know, be the older kids in an elementary setting, and then go to 6, 7, 8, a more traditional middle school. That made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense financially. It makes a lot of sense educationally to the educators. And now staff is going through that transition of how to pull back from 8th grade. And they're in their first year, so there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of people who spent much of their career in that, you know, middle school east building. There are a lot of people, frankly, in the Woodland building that spent much of their career there that miss the dynamics of that building. As much as we all know walking through it, that building had to go. And as much as the staff knew that building had to go. Yeah, I think they're learning through the transition, but that building is a beautiful building.
Well, you're always going to have, you know, what color is your parachute? Who moved my cheese?
Yeah, right.
I know it's going to be better.
Right.
But I got to get over the fact you moved my cheese.
Right.
You made a change.
Change is hard. Change is hard. And anybody that's moving organizations and changing organizations knows how hard that change can be. You know, and you know, part of it, we talk about change. Some of the more radical changes that we've talked about is the reorganization of the finance department at the town hall is a pretty drastic change. We put all collections, treasurer, finance all in one group.
Why? I mean, fundamental question. You have a system that's working, and you were one of the people who led the reorg. And some people asked, well, why are you trying to change things?
Well, if we're not changing, we're stagnant. If we're stagnant, good things aren't happening all the time. So we try to leverage the skill sets of the people we have. We try to combine like resources. When you can put them together, you can utilize resources in a different way. So when we take collections, treasurer, when we take even IT has a huge role in that whole finance department because it has all the enterprise-wide systems. It's as motivated as anybody to make sure IT is working, right? So you know, when you take a lot of like work and similar work, put it together, then you're just creating synergy. When you create the right synergy and allow people to do what they need to do, put the right people in the right place, as they say, I'm trying to remember the book where it talks about, you know, the fundamental role of management is, you know, get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and make sure the right people are sitting in the right seats is part of the way I envision organizational change. And sometimes, as I said, sometimes when you change things, that's where the real innovation can happen.
You know, and I always think of Teddy Roosevelt, because the philosophy you're talking about, he came out and he said, the mark of a good manager is to hire the right people, get them the right tools, and then be smart enough to get out of their way.
That's right, that's right.
And it seems like that type philosophy is in town hall.
I'm very happy with when we talk about the finance reorganization, I'm very happy about where people are, the way I see that staff interacting, and the good things that are coming out of it. Now, they're borne out in data, but some of it is a feel thing, right? Organizationally, is the organization clicking? But there's also data. How are we doing on our audits, third-party audits? How are we doing with our IT? Have we had a situation where payroll goes down and we're cutting checks manually for those 600
yes.
And then figuring out how to get them to all those people.
Then you hope that there's not going to be any mistakes. Keep punching in.
Right.
600 checks times 7 or 8 numbers.
But we have a procedure if our software goes down, if our IT goes down, if power goes out at a critical juncture and we can't get a server back up, we have a procedure, we've exercised it, we know how to do it. It's happened once in the 12 years I've been there, and it worked. Granted, people had to order pizzas and stay till midnight, but that's what we do.
I mean, I was the recipient of a Buckley memo once where you said, you know, years ago, town meeting got a report from the FinCom, and it really helped them. What are you guys doing? You know, and at first you sit there and say, Mezzafressin, get a turd grenade. And what annoyed me the most is that I had to have you point it out, because it was the right thing. Right. Years ago, we didn't dump on the town meeting an hour before 40 articles and say, I hope you can read fast. And all it had was 2 sentences each. Here's $500,000, and I'm going to give you 2 sentences. So, you know, as I thought about it, I said, dang, he's right. We ought to be doing this.
Yeah, and I know the initial reaction when you're talking about a volunteer position, and that's exactly what the FinCom is. They're not compensated for it, but they do a phenomenal amount of work, is it's more work. But if you segregate those duties, and I know you and a couple others have gone off to say, okay, what do we want to package with information weeks prior to the meeting, you look at the work that you guys are doing and preparing people that come to town meeting now versus what might have been done 7 years ago. And it's not even close.
But again, you did it again to me when you came back and said, okay, you've been complaining that you don't get information on articles. What are you going to do about it? Okay, as a fressin. You're right. So now we have the, I won't say it's a policy because FinCom doesn't set policy.
Right.
I mean, I always joke and say we're probably the most influential, powerless people because we don't even get a vote.
Well, it's an advisory board.
It's an advisory board.
Yeah.
You don't even get a vote.
Favorable or not?
You know, people say, "Oh, you have all this power." Really?
Yeah.
I have nothing. I can write a memo. But now every article going up, we're asking for 5 basic questions to be answered. So a month before town meeting on the website, anybody, because it's not just for town meeting members. I mean, it's if we're spending your money as a resident.
You explain it. Right?
You should have the right to say, you know.
Tell me about this.
Tell me about
this. Rationale.
But again, that was you pushing against the tide, because we didn't have that before.
Yeah, and I, you know, pushing on the FinCom is not hard because actually you guys challenge yourself to be better at a lot of things. You guys aren't stuck in a particular model. You know, once in a while we'll get in ruts, but you're not wed to any particular model. I think, you know, sometimes organizationally that can be harder. So for example, you know, one of the things that I've challenged the organizations within Town Hall to do is come up with a true 5-year plan and exercise that plan. And let's stop with the articles that come up and seem to come up out of the ozone sometimes and say, where did this come from? If it's not on your plan, it's an emergency. Otherwise, you've planned, it's been thoughtful. And in order to make sure every department gets their mind share and their time at the podium and their time at the table is to make sure that they are on the long range plan. Now we realize, you know, in the perfect world, everything's planned and we just exercise the plan and
there will be no emergencies or special circumstances.
The problem is you have things like winter. You have things like, you know, 100-year
accidents
storms.
And storms.
Accidents. So we push. But see, the beauty of it, in my opinion, is when those things come up, they truly are separate. Right. They stand out by themselves, and everybody acknowledges, yes, you had a 100-year storm and a part of the brook washed away, or there was a truck burned through an electrical fire. You know, that happened. And there are a number of things that you can think about. Sometimes winter takes its toll and lifts a walkway right up out of the ground.
Oh, it was a Princess Pine or Ivy Lane where the whole street just fell in on itself.
So those things are going to happen. There was over Westbrook, one of the brooks.
You took me down there with Godfrey Brook where it almost took somebody's house out.
Yeah, and there was also a part of the road that collapsed. So winter can take its toll. There are emergency things that we're not going to plan that 5 years from now that bridge or causeway or, you know. That.
But in a way, Bill, you are, because if we take care of 80%, then I would argue we are planning to leave a little bit there. I mean, when you look at what we built up stabilization, I feel very comfortable that if we really did get into an emergency, we can cover it. One way or another, we can cover it.
Yeah, the residents should feel good in that regard, that we're in a good space financially, and you know, whether you call it a stabilization fund, rainy day fund, you can call it a lot of things, but we're not going to impact services. We don't have to pay for trash bags. We don't have to nickel and dime on the fees. We've returned $10 million since I've been a selectman to the taxpayers through free cash and through other means. They should feel good that their community is stable financially, and if something happens, we're prepared to deal with it, and we think about these things. You're right. You know, I think we continue to do well financially, and you know, and I say that being mindful of the fact that, you know, we can all save money not repairing our house.
Well,
right? We can put money away and not fix the leaking roof. We can put money away and not take care of the boilers or the furnaces. We've not done that. And when you look at our inventory, if you will, of buildings and facilities, you look at what the police and fire department have, renovated buildings, you look at what the school system has for renovation in buildings. When you look at senior center, youth center, you look at the turf fields, now 2 of them, the second one coming online. At Woodland, that was part of the Woodland School Building
and we've
Committee.
got 3/4 of a third one saved up for the day we need it.
When we had to go out and buy $1 million fire truck, we knew we had to do it, we saved for it, we put it away. That's what's going to prevent us from having to go for overrides. Now when, you know, this is the season of politics, this is a season everybody's running for office, this is when signs go up. You know, I look at the signs in our community, and the signs in our community present different candidates, which is a good idea. Sometimes they can be thought to be a pain because the signs blow over or they're unsightly, but I'd rather have those signs any day than the signs a lot of communities have to put up to say, vote for override to fund our school, vote for the police department renovation.
So let me throw out some profanity.
Go ahead.
2.5 override debt exclusion.
Yeah, 2.5 override, I just cannot imagine a scenario where I would ever support a 2.5 override. I can't imagine it. We're too thoughtful in our planning. It's just dead on arrival when it hits my desk. So I say that with good confidence, and I say that with a lot of experience.
Sure. Tornado coming in could change our opinion, but...
Yeah, and even if a tornado comes in, to be honest with you, we've been thoughtful enough to say, look, we are self-insured, but we have catastrophic insurance that says, hey, if a $15 million building or $60 million building is destroyed, we've got a policy that has $1 million.
Yeah, 1 or 2 million is us.
Yeah, is us, and then the rest is on the insurance.
And we got 6 million tucked away just in case 3 of those buildings go down.
Exactly. So we're not waiting for things to happen. We're planning for thought. You know, it's thoughtful planning that gets us there.
And I think it's important because your board sets the philosophy. You know, when you talk about what we pay in taxes, we don't buy designer trash bags.
Right.
My daughter was in Worcester and paying $3 for a little yellow bag. We don't charge people to put their kids on a school bus.
Right. So there are no bus fees. Many, many communities have the bus fees.
Well, I mean, they play it. It's a fee. It's not a tax.
Right. Fees are taxes.
Yeah. I remember when the guy came in to talk about the stormwater, and he said, well, you don't have to tax people. You can charge them fees. I said, sir, if I feel your hand going in my pocket,
call it whatever you want. Call it an apple, call it an orange.
It's still, you're taking money out of my pocket.
Yeah. When you talk about override, I'm more in favor of underrides. So when you think about what we're doing as a community, and I know you're up to speed on it, but just to explain it briefly, there's a few things we're doing, right? We're proposing a budget this year that has us $3 million below the levy capacity. Find another community in the state that hasn't taxed to the maximum Proposition 2.5 levy capacity. Some of them are under by 100,000, 20,000, 10,000. We're talking about $3 million. We've also talked about and have over the past 10 years, I brought it up earlier, provided $10 million back to the taxpayer to keep that tax rate down. That's incredible, and we ought to be very proud of that. We ought to be very proud of our leadership. We ought to be very proud of the cooperation that it takes for boards to agree on these, because these are serious decisions, right? This is serious people and serious decisions. And, I think the way we get there ultimately is beneficial to the taxpayer, but beneficial to the community.
Government structure. I mean, obviously, you're one of the people who led the reorg. Do you see any other changes we need?
There may be. One of the things I'm a little bit worried about right now is it's possible that we could outgrow our town hall space. That has me thinking about what the next 10 years could bring and how we might want to solve that problem. I don't want to use ancillary buildings. I don't want to use Lot B, Lot A, Building A, Building B, because I think you lose a lot of synergy that happens between staff members. Where you think about from a customer-focused standpoint, the customer experience, they walk in, they need to visit 3 offices. They don't always know which office they need to. We should be able to steer them through that. So they need to see Amy at town clerk's office, and they need to go to the Board of Health, and they need to go to collector. They should be able to do that within the same building. We're not a city where we need 7 municipal buildings. So we talk about and think about things like expansion. There's possibility that we may be coming forward talking about an expansion of town hall. For example, there's a possibility to go back out towards the back of that building, expand the parking lot, which is oversubscribed already today based on customers and people. There are offices that are oversubscribed based on customer need and people. And there may be the ability to take Court Street, take some buildings behind it, go through eminent domain in a process of improvement where we can take some space, expand the parking lot, expand the building, still give our customers one-stop shopping, and still give the ability of staff members to interact and not be in the other building. Right? So, and maybe there are ways to fund that can be creative.
Well, that comes up when people say Middle School East.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And everybody's saying, well, we'll just find somebody to take it over and pay us a lot of taxes. And I'm like, oh, that would be nice, but I haven't heard any real feasible alternatives for Middle School East yet.
No, and nor have we gone out and taken proposals. I think the construction of Middle School East and its addition that it had in 1979 really is an offset, right? It's offset to the height of the buildings. It's problematic for expansion for any one customer, for any one business. The construction type would make it expensive to drop, but at the same time, it may require $5–6 million just to get up to speed. Yeah, and I say speed. Just your basics. If somebody wants to have an office in there, it's likely that unlike a school building where it's not used in the summer, they might want air conditioning. It doesn't have the electrical services to provide air conditioning. It doesn't have air conditioning. So those are just some examples, but obviously they get into major renovation. We're talking about asbestos removal. We're talking about ADA compliance. We're talking about a lot of things that are truly cost drivers. And as much as school or anybody else tried to figure out a space for that, they were just unable to. And when you look at our school population has pretty much been flat for the last 10 years overall.
Well, I keep bringing up, in '74, we graduated 222 children from Milford High, 1974. Last year, I think we did 260.
Right, and not a lot of, so it's amazing to think about the growth, and I think that number's been pretty flat. I think some of the things we have to worry about, though, are but renovation of Milford High, because I think there are probably programs in there they may want to relook at.
They need more geography.
And, there may be programs they might want to add. But what really they have to get control of is the ability to stop the bleeding from a sense of students going out, right? We've got, school choice, which is a tremendous concept, an idea that parents get to choose and students get to choose the school that they go to and the programs that are offered, and they get to shop around. It's really a customer-driven, right, market disruptor. But with that, the money goes with them. And if students are choicing out, we've got to figure out why. We've got to make sure that we're offering the right programs, and it's largely dependent upon the school department
and
doing that.
The money hurts, but having large number of families turn their back on Milford emotionally hurts me more.
Yeah, you're right. As a matter of pride, you want to have the right programs.
I mean, I don't want to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, but if it was the right thing,
right,
we can deal.
right.
But I want our families to be proud of our town and to want to be here. Immigration, hot topic always.
Yeah, it's a hot topic nationally, actually all over the country, and worldwide, right? And I think we're not talking about immigration because, you know, all of our parents came through immigration. I think the real topic is what's the impact of illegal immigration, and what's the both positive ramifications of immigrants coming in to do work, and what's the downside or negative implications? What can it have an impact on as it relates to police services, unlicensed drivers? What can it have for overcrowding of homes? Sometimes we find that you know, buildings that were two families suddenly become boarding houses that have 27 occupants or whatever. And that's highly disruptive.
But now, you're the selectman of Milford. And everybody says, fix the immigration problem.
Yeah.
Are you going to deport them to Rhode Island? I mean,
no, but you know, there are things we can do, and there are things we have done. We were one of the first municipalities in New England to sign a cooperative agreement with ICE that says, you know, we're going to ask employers to check their status. As a matter of policy, we're not a sanctuary city or town, and so as a result, federal detainers for immigrants wanted on crimes, they're detained within the law, right? Within what bail sets and all of those things that can influence it, and they're detained and handed over to ICE. Now, a lot of those people can be some very bad people, and frequently, because of the great relationship that the chief has and our public safety people have with the immigrant community, they're people that the immigrant community wants out of their community. A lot of times it's through joint cooperation, somebody coming in and saying, hey, we got a guy who's wanted in Brazil on some bad things, or you know.
We got a guy who's doing bad things in our community around our kids. What parent wouldn't want to help eliminate that threat?
So, you know, we have some challenges. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, I fought when the Governor, Deval Patrick, first considered the concept of licensing, providing driver's license to illegal immigrants, and said, hey, I think that's a bad idea and a slippery slope. I joined Senator Fatman in his press release and calling that a very bad idea. And I call it a bad idea for a reason. There have been some challenges in Milford. We've lost 3 people to some people that shouldn't have been driving, and you know, in one of those cases, one of the people escaped justice by going back to their home country after having killed a Milfordian. So I'm mindful of those families all the time. Think about what we might do. Our joint cooperation with ICE, I think, is a great idea, and I think it's supported by the community. I also think that the work that the chief is doing, working with, you know, working with the immigrant community, working with the churches, working with the pastors, to make sure there's a conduit of communication back and forth, make sure that, one, we're protecting and serving the entire community, regardless of race, religion, any of those things. That's the right thing to do. In the same way that if somebody's in a traffic accident and somebody's hurt on the side of the road, we take them to the hospital for care. We protect and serve through law enforcement as well. I think those things are working, and it's largely a result of the philosophy that the community has, and their public servants, their elected officials, being consistent and aligned with that policy. I think it's a quality of the standard.
Well, I've always felt very good that as I look through the New York Times and other places and see all the demonstrations about the police force, we've had 2 demonstrations about our police force.
That's right.
One was that cold, rainy day where a lot of Milfordians turned out to say thank you.
That's right.
And 2, are all the signs in people's front yards.
Yeah, I think we're highly supportive of our public safety and first responders in general, not just police, but police and
Fire, paramedics.
Yeah. So I think we're highly supportive of that. You're right. I was there on that day with my grandson, having a ball, standing out in the cold for as long as we could, making sure that the police officers understood their communities behind them. That was a great showing. It's good to see that. We don't see those other demonstrations as you were talking about across the country.
And I'm proud we don't.
No.
Because if Tom O'Laughlin was setting the wrong environment, the wrong culture, then we would.
Yes.
Because Milford's never been shy. But it's really nice that most people here, there's probably some who don't, really appreciate our first responders and what they go through.
You're right, and it's the dust and testas. It's the, as much as the chief sets the tone and sets the leadership, which is, an important part of what happens organizationally, letting his people go out, making sure that the hiring is right, making sure that they're trained correctly. It's all of what happens, and then letting those people go to do great things in the community. You look at Robbie Tassino, you look at, some of the...
You name so many.
Yeah, you could just go on and on. Bobby Pavia, Kenny Kate, you look through this police force, Russell Poisson, I could go on, and I know I've forgotten more than I should. But the fact of the matter is genuine good people, good hearts, care about the community, always trying to do the right thing. And, I stand by them.
I remember seeing an officer on a detail. It was snowy, it was miserable. I was coming home, I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts, I drove by. He was really appreciative. I just handed him a hot cup of coffee, and I'm sitting there saying, let me think, I'm in my nice warm car, going to my nice warm house. You're out here freezing your backside off. It doesn't seem like I really did a lot by handing you a nice hot cup of coffee.
And look at the risks they take.
Oh.
The risks they take for us standing out there on a snowy road when we're worried about slipping and sliding. They're the first target for a car going off the road, getting hit. We had an officer recently injured pretty badly. Nate was hurt when he was hit by a bucket in a loader, standing there directing traffic, making sure that cars were safe and pedestrians were safe.
And he takes it.
He took that.
New program, Milford Bus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You were pretty vocal about your stand on it.
Oh yeah, I was so strong in favor of piloting that program, especially when we looked at the state funding they came in, the grant, the Chenal grant that came through from the hospital. That program cost us very little money in the end, and I think we're in the right position to pilot it and see how it goes. I think our numbers are climbing. I'm generally in favor of a second pilot year. I'm not at any point committed to putting the funds in there permanently. Because I still think the community is learning about the service. But when we look at, and I was just talking to Jennifer Walsh, working with the special needs students, where she's doing training to make sure that as those students reach a certain age and they're no longer provided services by the school system, that they have the opportunity to go be employed, be productive citizens. She's doing training programs, kind of like an occupational therapy type training program for kids with special needs that are our kids, our community's kids, as much as they are the kids of parents, right? That make sure those kids have services, make sure they can be productive. And so, the model of kids with Down syndromes being in homes 50 years ago, is just so troubling when we look at it. And so now we think of what a joy, what a value, how much reward we get. We look at, I look at, it's just amazing when you think about it, right? You go to places, whether it's Shaw's, that make an effort to employ children with special needs. And I say children, young adults. When you look at how inclusive our society is, look at our, I don't know if you've been to a football game recently or a basketball game where the cheerleaders have made that inclusive.
Absolutely.
I'm very proud to be a Milfordian when I see these types of things happening, and I see somebody, an angel like Jen, working with these children. And Jen is just one of them. Alexis is one of them. There are so many people that...
But we were talking about it, and the way she described it went against, because originally you said you Al, we're going to have metrics. And I said, Bill, there's 3 metrics in my mind. Ridership, ridership, ridership. But Jen opened my eyes. Because she says, Al, this is low ridership, but very high impact. Because some of the kids that we're working with and planning, you know, for Best Buddies and all, their parents are just strung out. I mean, anybody who's had kids knows how
strung out you can be.
And then you put the special needs on top of it.
Right.
So letting or giving an opportunity for a child, one, for their self-esteem, it's unbelievable. Because they get to go.
You bet.
You know?
You bet. And you look at the rate of autism. To me, that seems to have climbed phenomenally. I'm not sure doctors and scientists have figured out why. So autistic, Down syndrome children, kids with, you know, in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, we were talking a lot about the polio epidemic and what was happening through the country with polio. But now you just see different things, an evolution of things, where it's creating, it's not only families in stress, but it's, you know, it's not only students in stress, but it's families in stress. And I think there's ways in which the community, like Milford, is happy to help. But when you look at our ridership numbers are going up. Where the last couple of months have been at 100 riders. That's not bad. I wanted to see it get better, but it is getting.
Well, Mike Suarez brought in the first set of data. It was $40 a ride.
Right.
And I remember, because I said it publicly, that if you're going to judge this program in 90 days, shut it down now.
Right.
I don't know of any business program.
Nope.
You'd never start a marketing program and say,
let's try this for
90
weeks,
days,
yeah,
you know.
for 3 months.
But the last one, he was down to $24 a ride. Not where we want to be, but as long as that trend, I don't know it'll ever get down to $1 or $2. I don't know that it has to.
You know, I serve with the Metro West Regional Transport Authority as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and we have the commitment that as long as the budgets come in the way they should, the way that we anticipate, that we still have that contribution from the MWRTA. We're not going to be continually year after year getting the Chennault grant, but we're likely getting some portions of things that may contribute to it. So we'll see where all this goes, but I think it's a worthy second-year pilot.
$5 million for the youth center, plus. If we can put that kind of money into taking care of a segment of our kids, $4 million into an athletic program, you know, for fields. Okay, so it's just another group of people and kids.
Yeah, and you're right. You're not going to measure it, you know, at the end of the day. You're not going to measure it in 90 days. You're not going to measure it in a balance sheet. It's not going to be cost per ride. It's not going to be, it's going to be what's the impact.
If we ever really figured out what it cost to have kids playing sports, you couldn't justify it.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have children if you figured out how much kids cost, right? What's a prom dress today, or you know, what's what's a new baseball?
And now we get to start again with grandkids.
That's right. That's right.
Water company. You're probably one of the most educated people on why are we buying the water company?
Well, we're not buying the water company. We're looking into proposals to buy the water company to see if we can take that to town meeting. We want to give the community the opportunity to either decide whether it wants to own its water resources or not.
Why?
Yeah. You know, I think it's really, I think you can boil it down to a few things. I think you can boil it down to accountability, where we're not dealing with the utility. Much like the Sewer Enterprise Fund, we're able to replace folks within a position of sewer commissioners if we don't like the service they're providing, if they're not as responsive. You know, the Milford Water Company, while it's a small utility, still behaves and acts like a utility, right? It's not a national grid, and it's not you know, one of those services, but it's still a utility. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we think we may be able to operate it better. No matter what happens, a pipe breaks under the ground, the ratepayers are going to pay it, whether the water company owns it.
See, I think that's what people forget. I mean, when I think about, and you bring up sewer, because that's probably the best, you know, analogy you could draw. It's not a 9-to-5 job. Something happens. Tom, Rudy, John, they're down there in the middle of the night. You know, and last time I looked, they really don't get paid. So,
yeah, I think they have a $300 stipend.
Yeah,
but they go out on calls. If they get a call from somebody, they'll go first sometimes to go see it.
But that's my point.
That's impressive.
When somebody asked me, well, why do we think we can do the water company's job better? I said, you know, actually, if we just did it as well, then the profit and the taxes and all the pieces
Come together.
come together. We don't have to pay it.
Right, right. So we're in the process. So, you know, what's important to understand in the middle of this discussion is we're in executive session, still working with a
Well,
water
you still got
company.
a kind of a gag order on you.
Yeah, a little bit. So if you want to talk about, as you did, you talked about the premise of why you'd want to consider it. That's all fair discussion. I'm not at the point where I want to take it to town meeting. There's still work that needs to be done. We're talking about $63 million, a very significant purchase. Granted, it doesn't change the rates, it doesn't change any of that, it should be rate neutral.
And I think that's something that people have to understand.
The rates will pay for it.
You know, if we can't come up with, I know as a FinCom member, and you said as a selectman, that if we can't do this revenue neutral,
I'm not doing it.
we're not doing it.
I'm not doing it. And there's a lot of reasons why. By the way, when you do an acquisition of a company, you take on a certain amount of liability. I want to understand very clearly what that liability is. So with any acquisition, there's called, what the phase of the acquisition that we're in now is really due diligence. Are there any?
I guess the problem I have is people don't seem to understand that if anything happens, we pay for it anyway, just 3 years later with a profit margin on top.
Right. I just want to be clear at the end of the day before I take a proposal to town meeting that says it's $63 million, $61 million, whatever it is, right, that I know that's in fact what it is. For the same reason I wouldn't want to acquire a piece of property in town that may have been contaminated.
You wouldn't go in and say, I want to buy this piece of dirt. Well, how much? I'm not really sure. And
well, more importantly,
could have oil under it that, who knows, like, remember the Pheno Field property that right, for how many years we didn't know what it was really going to cost us to clean it up?
Yeah, and that's the worry, right? I can come and say, hey, look, I think we ought to acquire this piece of property. Its sale price is $300,000 for a number. It's $300,000. I don't want to come back to them. I want to do my due diligence. I don't want to come back to them and say, you know that piece of property I convinced you to buy for $300,000?
Yeah.
It's got a $2 million liability. We've got to get with the DEP because we've got to clean up a waste oil problem, and it's going to cost $2 million more. So that's the business I don't want to be in.
And see, I can say this because I'm not involved, but I really feel that the risk is not that much greater because if pipes break, the water company will fix them.
That's right.
And in the next rate increase,
they're recouping their dollars.
Plus profit.
Plus profit. That's
and when I see the last two and how the selectmen had to fight to get them down to a 35% increase.
From an 84% request.
Gulp.
Yeah.
And what was it, 50% a couple years before that?
Yeah.
And I just sit there and say, okay, inflation's going up at 2%. I know there's stuff that happens, but a 50, a 30, and you know it's coming.
They've been holding off, and I think, you know, in part holding off because it makes it more attractive if they get a higher rate. So we've been in negotiations with mediators, and that's probably all I can talk about, other than to say we're in our due diligence phase. So we need to understand the financials. We need to understand the operations. We need to understand the engineering to make sure we understand what the potential risk associated with it.
I think most importantly is what you said. If it isn't revenue neutral, if it doesn't make sense, this is not we're going to buy the water company and let's figure out if it makes sense. This is should we buy it?
Well, it's actually more complex than that, and I'll tell you why. I think we could make it revenue neutral tomorrow. I think we could go out and acquire the water company and convince town meeting possibly to make the acquisition. What I don't want to do is come back 3 years later and say, you know the thing we should have known about? We didn't.
Yeah.
So it's all part of any acquisition's due diligence process.
Well, you're spending $60 million of residents' money. If you overdo the due diligence, I was going to say, God bless you, that's your job.
Yeah. And
that's why I elected you.
You know I'm more process-driven, more data-driven than most sometimes, and so I always want to see the process that the consultants and attorneys use to rate the risks. I want to see what plans might we be able to put in place to mitigate those risks. And I want to understand what the implications of those are, financially or otherwise. Am I going to need 30 people for 2 years to go do something, which I'm going to have to go back to town meeting and say, I messed up? Or am I going to say, these are all the things we knew about, this is, it was a solid due diligence. Now I'm comfortable in taking it to town meeting.
But you know, the difference too is when I look at the way, again, the analogy the sewer department's run, these guys really care.
You bet.
They really do a dang good job. Not that they're any smarter or work any, they just really care.
And that's halfway,
I mean, you got half the battle won.
You do if you care.
You know, when you find out that it's Sunday night and Morelli or Leoja, Cinadella are out there.
Yeah.
They don't have to be out there. It's not what we demand of them, but they're there because they're going to understand. And that shows in the rates.
Yeah, the rates haven't gone up in 9 years. This is why you can run an enterprise fund, not having to worry about profit like a private company, still be in control of your water resources, and then be accountable to your constituents.
You think about it, the stockholders in the sewer company, we're happy if they break even.
Right.
You know, the sewer commissioners aren't forced to give me a return on my investment as a profit.
Other than just make sure when you need the drain, it works.
It goes away, and you're not coming back to the town meeting asking for a lot of money. You're self-sufficient. Sounds pretty good. If the water company did that, I'd say you did your due diligence and it works.
You're right. You're right. So we'll see.
Made a big change in IT. I mean, for years, the tin cups and wires that were communications hubs and the stone tablets just seemed to get a little old.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about IT, it's important to be clear about what we're talking about. In this day and age, we're talking about ability to hit the internet. We're talking about the ability to get to the cloud. We're talking about the ability for multiple resources to share information. We're talking about the ability to maintain privacy within that, to make sure our systems aren't hacked, right? So that from a privacy and security standpoint, that people aren't able to get to the town residents' credit card information if they paid their tax bill with their credit card. If we're talking about protecting the employees' personal information as it relates to HIPAA. And, which is healthcare, privacy of healthcare information. We're also talking about accessibility. How easy are we to do business with if somebody wants to look on a website and see what it takes to get a permit, or who do they see about what? So they need to be able to navigate government, which is not easy all the time. That's half of what I do in constituent services, is help them navigate to the right office and traffic cop that. So it's a lot of things today when we talk about IT. You know, half of our training programs are right on the web, right on through the state. You know, for example, you and I take ethics training every year. That's done through the state, right on a computer. The same thing is done with employees.
But now when you think about it, for years, Mark on the FinCom had wanted to get tablets. I was one of the people who was fighting it because I couldn't make a tablet work in what we call the Selectman's room, room 3.
Right.
So I said, no, I don't want to spend any money. And I remember we had one IT director where he said I could have you up within the hour. And I was less than nice, I'll admit it. I said, here's my laptop. Our meeting is 2 hours.
Right.
I'll see you at the end of the meeting. But now with this reorganization and the focus, you know, and again, my hat's off obviously to Andy, but to Zach for managing it. All of a sudden we had infrastructure in town hall that worked. Now I was all for the tablets.
Yeah, and I also think a piece of that, because, you know, Andy is a smart guy. Zach's a smart guy, some hardworking people. But I also think when we went out and looked for resources, people like Dennis Carroll, Mark LeBlanc, Bill Sanborn, there were people there that run IT and have run IT in businesses for years. They were able to be a resource. They came together as a committee or a group, and they were really there for the sole purpose of helping Zach define this model, get the right resource, make sure that we're looking at the right resumes, the right skill sets for our demands, for our needs. You know, you look at what Andy's doing now, helping the library, helping the highway barn.
But again, that first meeting, I got in trouble for saying little Mark, because Mark LeBlanc is always going to be the 8-year-old little brother of the girl I went to school with.
Karen? You went to school with Karen?
Of course I did. I graduated with Karen.
Okay.
Still a good friend of Karen.
Bose.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hot ticket. I love Karen.
Mark was a good friend in high school.
But, you know, you sit there and say, the Bill Sanborns, the Mark, these guys know what it's like to support a $100 million company.
Right, and in Mark's case, he's actually doing it for a municipality and school system, right? So there's another case where, you know, you see it all come together.
It's not, you know, somebody who says, well, yeah, we've had 50 people on the network. You know, you listen to Bill, you listen to Mark, and these characters are thinking about 1,000 people.
Yeah, and when we think of it, right, we think about, you know, some of the resources we have in our community, and sometimes it's just about tapping them. It's about asking them. You make a request, and it's sure, I'm happy to help. Those resources are still available to Zach.
We couldn't afford the LeBlancs, the Sanborns.
Could not.
When you think of what they're worth and what they're paid.
There are many consulting companies, as they come together and figure out how to work together, they're also helping
meaning
Zach.
When you had 5 people all at a senior level, I'm sitting there saying, if this was Bose or Sequel, and we had to hire these people at $200 plus an hour.
A lot of billable hours there.
There, as I say, there's, you know, and 200 is just them.
And not to mention the fact that, you know, in order for me to keep on top of things and understand the direction they were going, you know, not only am I talking to Zach to get an understanding, but I'm also reaching out to the Marks, the Bills, and those folks in the Dennises, right? So, you know, so they're spending time on the phone helping me through the learning curve of understanding the direction we need to go and why.
Well, the other thing is, when a Bill or a Mark tells me something, I know they're shooting straight. They care. You know, they're long. Mark's a long time, 16 Cornell, whatever it was, you know, where he grew up. He's been there forever in this town. He's
married Karen Pagnetti.
There you go. You know, you sit there and say, these are long-term Milford families. So I automatically feel more comfortable.
Yeah, Bill, you look at Bill's work and body of work as an example.
Oh, and the building committee.
The building committee helping the school systems. You look at what Amy's worked on and where she's helped out. Just so many things that come together.
So as we look forward, what do you think the biggest challenges the town faces?
Well, I think we face some of the same challenges that other communities are going to face. I think in some cases, when you look at the EPA mandates, there are going to be communities across the Commonwealth that are going to be burdened by it. Each community, though, will be burdened in a different way. We're all environmentalists to some extent. We have to watch the regulations to make sure we're not over-regulating, under-regulating. I'll let the federal government figure that out. But at the end of the day, it's about Milford being compliant with federal law. So certainly that's a challenge. The estimates have been from $75 to $100 million that its impact could be. I think it could be far greater because the economic impact is not assessed.
That's what you can measure. That's the direct cost you can measure.
That's right. Take care of the stormwater, but what's the impact if we create a cooperative and now burden businesses, small businesses in town that have an acre or two of asphalt and roof.
And you sink their businesses, they don't have jobs, you start running down the non-measurable impact.
Right. And I think the impact could be phenomenal. So that's certainly a challenge that the community has to manage through. When we look at the water company, that's certainly a challenge. We've got to figure out how to do that. I've been negotiating for the better part of 2 years, working with consultants, mediators, and as they work through the water company process. I think we're coming to the end of that. I feel pretty good about where we are, but we're not quite there yet. There's more to be done. You know, I look at the opioid crisis as an example, and while many communities across the state and nation are struggling with that, I think Milford is also struggling with that. You know, a little known fact, I don't know if you know it or other people know it, but the Selectman and the Board of Health get a text every time Narcan is administered. Anytime somebody's that. Yeah, and I've always credited the Chief of Police for doing this because if the Selectman in any community in any city, mayors, council, whoever, are not aware every time there's an OD, they can't possibly empathize or understand the magnitude of the situation. So anytime where Narcan is administered, anytime somebody's taken to Milford Hospital, and frankly, anytime there's a death, as a result of that. You know, I went to a wake not long ago of somebody I coached football, and part of that whole challenge was the addiction challenge that contributed to the problem. Not to get into details, talk about families, but they're everybody's family. They're everybody's kids, and it knows no social or economic boundaries.
It's not like when we grew up, you thought of a heroin addict as inner city, down a dark alley, kind of sketchy person.
No, the phenomena lately, and you work in the medical industry, so you understand it. I think the phenomena lately has been, in part, a contribution by the medical community itself. And this is why you saw some of the legislation coming from the state talking about how much opioid you can prescribe, Percocets and...
well, young Joe Kennedy came on and he said he had an argument with his physician because he was going to be given X number, and he said, I
don't need those.
And the physician kept saying, take them anyway.
They give you 30 days. They're going to give a 14-year-old 30 days, 10 days, 15 days worth of Percocets for wisdom teeth removal. A young athlete today who's playing football, injures his knee or hurts his back, might be given a 30-day supply of OxyContins. Now, the problem with all of that is we put the right scenario and the right storm, perfect storm together, and these kids, having done nothing else other than follow doctor's instructions, can
get hooked quickly.
Now the problem is, they look to find those opiates after the doctor has shut off the spigot. Those pills can be $80 on the black market.
$1 a mig.
Where heroin can be less than a six-pack.
Right.
And it's the same opioids, now with fentanyl and now with synthetic additives that are killing people by the day.
So Bill, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, hopefully through the last 12 years and the other work that I've done, even in the school committee, long-range planning, councils, all of that, hopefully the interview process is done. I think people understand what they get. And the question is, are they dealing with somebody who's serious? Are they dealing with somebody who has the ability to make hard decisions? And for each voter, that's different, right? It's a different answer. You know, I feel like the body of work speaks for itself, but in addition to that, I'm also still ready to work for their vote. I do that in a variety of ways, and I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people. We still do the old traditional sign standouts, but yeah, I think you know, it's the body of work, the experience, the resume, and what you're ready to contribute tomorrow in some of the challenges we've talked about today.
Well, thank you. And as always, we really do need people. You know, in this case, a couple decades of your life been dedicated to helping out the residents. I've always said I'll never ask you to vote for a specific person, not my place. I'll beg you to vote on April 4th. Get to know these candidates, get to know what they've done, you know, what accomplishments they've actually completed, and make sure that they'll represent you and your views here at the center of the universe. So thank you for everything you've done and everything you will do. To our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thanks for watching.
Not too long since I've been home.